underdog, play the part. They call me an outlaw.
Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. I have discussed the moon landings on previous shows, and this subject can be a very hot potato. Whatever your opinion is on whether in 1969 Neil Armstrong walked on the lunar surface or not, I think you will be very interested to see the evidence and analysis put forward in today's show. To help me delve into some more moon mission evidence, I'd like to welcome back onto the show Andrew Johnson. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for inviting me back, Richard.
Viewers may remember, you can follow the link on the screen here, that I went over to the States to interview statement analyst Peter Hyatt, who is an expert in analysing language and what people say in discussion and analysing whether they are telling the truth or not. I chose a 7-minute long Neil Armstrong interview and I sent it to Peter Hyatt. Have you got a rough figure as to how many cases you've looked at?
Hundreds techniques used to discern deception, but also content analysis. So it goes well beyond just saying if someone is lying or not. What are they lying about? Why are they lying? Well, tell us what happened and what happened next. Those are the two most powerful questions that we have. What happened? What happened next? Mm-hmm. It allows them to choose whatever they want to choose. And this is an important point. The average person has a vocabulary of about 20,000 words. When you ask someone what happened, they must go into that vocabulary, decide what words to use out of the 20,000, where to order them, what verb tenses to use, what pronouns to use, where to place each word next to each other to communicate in less than a microsecond of time. That is a process that, when disrupted by deception, we catch.
So this interview aired on the Sky at Night on the 18th of November 1970, which is less than a year and a half after the moon landings. So everything should be pretty clear in Neil Armstrong's mind. So what you're going to see here is a very short clip of the interview, followed by Peter Hyatt's analysis, then another clip, and then more analysis. So although it's only a 7-minute long interview, probably take me 20-25 minutes to get through the analysis. So here goes.
Mr. Armstrong, I do realize that when you were on the moon, you had very little time for gazing upwards. But could you tell us something about what the sky actually looks like from the moon, the sun, the earth, the stars, if any, and so on?
The sky is a deep black when viewed from the moon, as it is when viewed from cislunar space, the space between the Earth and the moon.
We note and as pauses in the answer and seek to determine if this is a habit of speech or if it is a signal that the subject needs more time to consider his answer. That he began with "the sky is deep black" indicates a willingness to answer the question directly. This is a somewhat lengthy answer which begins with 2 pauses for thought. The subject is presupposed to have been on the moon, something of great rarity at the time of this interview. The subject is intelligent and well trained. The expectation is that he will, according to the wording of the question, report what he himself saw. In any singular or exclusive event, there is an expectation of heightened importance, and when we speak from experiential memory, the structure of the sentence is reliable. Expected. Given the unique experience of being on the moon, we first note that the subject does not begin his answer with the pronoun I. In analysis, this reduces reliability. Given the context of unique experience, the pronoun I would have shown the psychological strength of experiential memory. Its absence is noted. Even with influence from the interviewer, the expectation is the experiential use of I saw in some part of the answer. Next, we note the use of passive voice with "when viewed from the moon." Passive voice removes the subject himself personally from the statement. The use of passivity is found in concealing identity and/or responsibility in statements. For example, "the gun went off" is passive voice. If the subject was in a crowd and did not know who fired the gun, this would be appropriate. Here, the subject is describing a universal viewing and avoiding the singular experience that is expected. Next, "when viewed from cislunar space," the space between the Earth and the Moon. This is similar to the universal pronoun "you" that is used to describe a common experience. This leads to a question. Is viewing the space between the Earth and the Moon a common experience that listeners would readily relate to?
The Earth is the only visible object other than the Sun that can be seen, although there have been some reports of seeing planets.
This is his second sentence after reporting in both passive and universal language. He tells us in general terms what you, universal unnamed, can know, similar to what would be reported in a textbook. Please note the inclusion of some reports. He has thus far avoided giving us personal experience that is highly expected in such an event. This is an indication of avoidance of the response. There is no linguistic connection here between the subject and experiential language at this point. Okay, so Peter Hyatt now gives his conclusions. He says, Neil Armstrong does not linguistically connect himself to the lunar landing. This is evident in his consistent distancing language, including intuitive pronouns and passivity. What may have caused this? So Peter Hyatt now gives 4 possibilities. Remember, he's a professional analyst, so he's covering his bases here with these 4 possible reasons. You'll see in a moment why I'm saying that. So the first possibility is that there is a security mandate. So Neil Armstrong's been told, you're not allowed to tell anyone. The second is that this is his baseline. So in other words, he talks like this all the time, even when he's talking to his wife. So say his wife said, Neil, did you enjoy yourself at the pub? He would say, when you go to the pub, you do enjoy yourself if you have a beer with your friends. He goes around talking like that, right? So I don't put much credibility in option 2. Option 3, he's a liar. He's deceptive. Lack of commitment mimics deceptive language. The lack of personal commitment in context is stark. The 4th is unknown. Okay, so he's hedging his bets a little bit. But I know where my belief lies there. Personally, I think it's number 3. I don't think Neil Armstrong walked on the lunar surface. And you've also got to bear in mind here that Peter Hyatt is an American who completely believed the Apollo story. He wasn't aware of any conspiracy stuff before he did this analysis. So this is a 100% believer. Okay? So in his emails with me after he did this analysis, this is what he said. This was so unexpected that I ran it by another analyst. I grew up at age 7 with his account. There's a strong emotional connection with childhood national pride. The teachers repeatedly visited it, including newsreels. I did not expect this. I originally felt guilty wasting your money. But after the first few answers where he is linguistically nowhere to be found, I realized that there is more here than what is ridiculed. Heather, too, that's his wife, who was also a trained analyst, is shocked. We both said the same thing. Things we dismissed as crazy years ago have been proven true more and more. We need to stay more open and explore.
The analysis that I presented at that lecture was not the full analysis. There is more in this document from Peter Hyatt, and I am going to make this available as a download, right? So this is quite extensive analysis. Now, there's one particular interview with an astronaut. This is Buzz Aldrin that I was very interested in. So this is Bart Zabrell, the chap who made the film Astronauts Gone Wild. And my opinion on that interview is that it's very telling, because I felt that Buzz Aldrin was almost admitting to something in that interview. What were your feelings on it, Andrew?
Yes, it does seem like he was trying to pass the buck to somebody else. He says, you should go and talk to the NASA administrator. We were just guys going on a flight. He didn't really seem to be that interested in saying, oh yeah, we definitely went, and this is how we prove it. He didn't really come back with any of that. And he sort of quickly went into the more personal attacks, and saying that Bart Zabrell was on an ego trip or something. And so, again, people should watch that interview as well as, watching what you're going to show next. I think we originally thought the Apollo missions were real, and, I was personally very upset when I realised that they couldn't have been real.
So to set the scene, Bart Zabrell, who was very sceptical of the Apollo missions, he doesn't believe they went to the moon. He manages to get in front of Buzz Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin doesn't really know he's going to be challenged. He just knows it's some media interview. And then Bart Zabrell produces this very damning piece of evidence, this tape of them faking the shot of the Earth out the window to make the Earth look further away. And You can see Buzz Aldrin's reaction to that. He's stunned by it because he starts asking him how he's got a hold of it.
That's right, and that film is in A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. That clip is shown in bits in Astronauts Gone Wild, but if they want to see the whole clip, that's in the other film of Bart Zabrell's, which is A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon.
Before I show the analysis, just a quick word about Bart Zabrell. I highly recommend watching his films, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon and Astronauts Gone Wild. In researching and making these films, Bart Zabrell has showed great resourcefulness and courage in bringing to light new information about the validity of the Apollo missions and shining a light on the astronauts involved. So I would like to thank him for all his hard work. Now, I sent professional statement analyst Peter Hyatt a transcript of Bart Zabrell's Buzz Aldrin interview with the intention of finding out from Buzz Aldrin's own words whether he was lying and what might be being concealed.
I mean, do you have Neil Armstrong interviewed already?
The interview begins with the subject posing a question about his flight team member. Please consider this is a possible defensive posture on the part of the subject. In a prior interview, there was a linguistic reluctance to commit to information about the lunar landing. The analysis of that interview concluded that this could be from a number of reasons with two dominant themes. 1, the subject did not experience lunar landing. 2, the subject did experience lunar landing but was under strict orders to not disclose information about such as part of national security. Here we may consider that the subject, Aldrin, does not wish to be psychologically alone with the possible disclosure of classified information. It could be classified due to military necessity, whether it was a military form of deception to cause other nations to believe the United States held technological advantage or not, the language would be the same.
No, he doesn't want to be interviewed.
Well, I know.
The subject recognizes that the member of his team does not want to be interviewed. Please consider the possibility that before the interview begins, our subject does not wish to be interviewed either. This is not lost on the interviewer.
Why does he not give interviews?
The question is specifically seeking why the reluctance to give information exists.
Well, because that's his personal choice. And I guess it's mine, in a way, to do things when they've been researched and worked out as far as a business arrangement. This is not news. This is not an anniversary.
Well, actually it is. We found a very unique reel of footage that we have queued up to show you.
Yeah.
And it's from the mission. And to our knowledge, no one has ever seen it before.
Mm.
And it's 30 years old.
And you want me to see this while you have me on camera?
We have confirmation that the subject's concern is exposure of information from him to the public.
Well, and to tell us what it is. I mean, it's...
Well, I don't know why I should do that.
This has caused a considerable increase in tension for the subject, the unknown footage. Note the language that follows. Not only does he interrupt the interviewer, but specifically shows us the indicators of tension.
It's a very unique footage.
What would be very unique would be only to the public, not to an eyewitness who was there.
Maybe, then I need to see it, and then we sit down and we talk about what you're taking a picture of. I don't see where there's an advantage in it for me to do what you're asking me to do. I see all sorts of pitfalls. I see people who have managed to talk to somebody. Who did you talk to in our office?
The subject begins with a pause, well, indicating a need to think for answers. The subject acknowledges that it may be that the interviewer has very unique, never-seen-before footage. This is to affirm the possibility of such existence.
I think when you see the footage, you'll see that it's
Well,
very extraordinary, one of a kind,
Okay.
behind the scenes type
Yeah.
of footage.
Yeah. Well, if it is, why do you have access to something that no one else has seen before?
He now turns into the interviewer. Trust is broken as he challenges the interviewer, not with how, but why. This reduces sensitivity towards the footage down and sensitivity personally towards the interviewer upward.
Serendipity, I guess. And it was recorded on the 18th
Of what?
of July, 1969.
Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over.
Do you remember this?
The 18th?
Sure. Okay,
Aldrin watches the footage. The footage shows the Earth filmed from within the Apollo 11 spacecraft at a time when the mission was supposed to be halfway to the moon. The footage shows the astronauts filming the Earth from the back of the spacecraft through a circular window a number of feet away. It is claimed they are using a crescent-shaped insert in the circular window in order to mimic the Earth's terminator, the line between day and night, so that the Earth appears to be much further away than it actually was. The lights are turned out within the spacecraft, making the space within the spacecraft indistinguishable from the space outside the spacecraft surrounding the Earth. Sibrel believes Apollo 11 was in a low Earth orbit for the duration of the mission, and these shots were being made by the astronauts to possibly be used to convince the public that Apollo 11 was on its journey to the moon. The final shot shows Michael Collins with the Earth outside the window looking very large, indicating Apollo 11 probably was in a low Earth orbit at this time.
Hello, Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Sure. Okay, Roger, Roger, Neil, we just wanted a narrative such that we can, when we get the playback, we can sort of correlate what we're seeing. Thank you very much.
Well, we shut out the sun coming in some of the other windows into the spacecraft, so it's looking through the number one window, and there isn't any reflected light. We only have one window that has a view of the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera. South America becomes invisible just off beyond the terminator or inside the shadow. We can see the oceans with a definite blue cast, see white bands of major cloud formations across the Earth.
Roger, the ATC is working real well. The F-22 looks good. Over. Hello, Apollo 11, Houston, did you copy? Over.
Roger, we copied that, Charlie.
Roger, your transmissions the last couple of times have been about 2 by. Over.
Okay, how do you read me now?
Right, you're 5 by now.
Coastline.
Now we're coming in. Can't quite make out who that is.
What is your proposition? That we didn't go to the moon?
I know for a fact that you did. I know for a fact that you did not.
You know for a fact that we did not.
That's correct, and you'll see this tape proves that.
Okay, well, I'm not interested in satisfying your suppositions when there's all this evidence that we did.
This is an unexpected and weak assertion. It goes to evidence. This is a subtle form of distancing language. When one experiences something personally, particularly something that is dramatic or historic, the expected language will always be his personal experience. The subject will not have need for nor interest in evidence. This is the psychological wall of truth that shows itself strongly in language. It is not here.
This proves, as you see, that you were using the window to demonstrate that you were halfway to the moon when you were
Turn the camera off, please. Turn the camera off.
I know for a fact, we've had this analyzed, and this is the window, and you're in, and it's dated by an atomic clock at the Goldstone tracking station, which is on the tape.
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy. Why don't you talk to the administrator at NASA? We're passengers. We're guys going on a flight.
Yes, it does seem like he was, he was trying to pass the buck to somebody else. He says, you should go and talk to the NASA administrator. We were just guys going on a flight.
And this makes you the real famous person that has discovered this and reveals all this stuff. What an ego you must have to want to propel yourself like this.
In any interview, the interviewer will get one of two impressions. Either the subject is working with them to facilitate the flow of information, or he is working against the interview to hinder it. Buzz Aldrin began with a defensive posture. He introduced payment, representation, but also the sensitive topic of authority. Our subject was acutely aware of the need, even years later, for official permission to speak freely. This is in fact something that did come out of this interview as part of the analysis conclusion. Aldrin does need permission to freely choose to share information about a mission many years prior. This is evident from his words regarding his fellow astronauts' choice. Why is this? Although money was mentioned, which may go back to an official position where being paid for appearances needed approval, it does not appear strongly linked in the language. Classified information. Information remains classified for many decades. Those with experiential memory of a historical event will have it reflected in their language. If they must conceal the information regardless of the cause of concealment, it will put them under considerable stress and will show itself in the language. This concealment will often be seen linguistically through a lack of commitment. Passivity, passive voice, as well as skipping over time is expected. This event, whether it was actual or was a military bluff, was a historic event for them. The language will reflect this. The defensive posture of the subject was already high before the journalist raised it to the point of effectively ending the interview. The origin of defensive posture and sensitivity towards the topic itself is not known here. And interestingly, around that time, that's when Buzz Aldrin punches him in the face, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was, I think when he was going out of the hotel, or maybe the next day when he went back, that's when there's this altercation, and which results in physical violence.
You really like adventure, don't you? You're the one who said you walked on the moon when you didn't. Calling the kettle black, if I ever thought of it. Saying I misrepresented myself.
Away from me.
You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
Okay, so what's going on here? If they didn't land Apollo 11 on the moon, did they land 12 or 14 or 15? Because there are 6 missions that NASA claim landed on the moon. Did any of them go? Were they getting a bit nearer each time? Well, let's present some evidence from Apollo 17, the last mission which supposedly landed on the lunar surface. Here are 2 photographs from that mission. If we look at the top one, we've featured this on Rich Planet before, but I think it's important to go through it again. So what we're led to believe here, if you just look at the top image, is that the lunar lander's come down, it's landed on the lunar surface, the astronauts have got out, they've climbed down this ladder, and they've walked towards the camera. One of them's turned round and taken a snapshot of the lunar lander with some hills in the background. They've then continued walking in the same direction, 150 meters. One of them has then started doing a little experiment. The other one turns around and takes a photograph of him with the background. So you can see the lunar lander here in the 2 shots. Now just look at the backdrops. Look how similar they are. Look at Hill B here with this shading on it. What are the chances on Earth if me and you get out of a car and I take a photograph of the car, and then we walk 150 meters down the road and I take a photograph of you with a car in the background? What are the chances of getting an almost identical backdrop? It doesn't look good for NASA. Now, this doesn't prove that Apollo 17 didn't land. It just proves that they've faked some photographs in a studio.
Just to point out, I don't read from Wikipedia because it represents truth. I read from Wikipedia because it represents the official narrative. It represents what NASA has told the public. So this is the first comment I want to draw people's attention to. Apollo set major milestones in human spaceflight. It stands alone in sending manned missions beyond low Earth orbit and landing humans on another celestial body. So just consider that. Nobody else, no country, no organization other than the Apollo moon missions have sent anyone beyond low Earth orbit. Now, if you consider the evidence that I've just presented, it's quite possible that those Apollo moon missions did not go beyond low Earth orbit.
My name is Kelly Smith, and I work on navigation and guidance for Orion. We are headed 3,600 miles above Earth, 15 times higher from the planet than the International Space Station. As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
So what this is telling me, none of them have gone beyond low Earth orbit. Here's another quote from Wikipedia. The first manned flight of Orion, that's the new rocket that they're developing, and SLA, Exploration Mission 2, EM2, is to launch between 2019 and 2021. It is a 10 to 14 day mission planned to place a crew of 4 into lunar orbit. So it's going to take them till 2020 just to get a man to orbit the moon. Now, according to NASA, there were 8 missions in the 1960s which orbited the moon with men in the spacecraft. That was 50 years ago. So why is it taking them up until 2020 to do the same? In my opinion, this is more evidence that those 1960s missions probably did not go anywhere near the moon.
Gerard White has done many videos on the Apollo hoax, many different aspects.
Because he has a scientific background in geology, doesn't he?
I think something like that, yes, yes.
And how he's from this spectroscopy graph, he's worked out the percentages of the various different elements.
Yes, and this video is called a Chinese road trip, I'm sure you...
So it's Moon Faker, Chinese road trip. So you'd need to watch that to get the full details.
And you probably need to watch it twice as well, because it's very, very dense with details.
Right. Now, the rocks that the Apollo missions allegedly brought back, I can put this graphic up from Jarrah White's video. This shows a picture of the moon, and the numbers there, 12, 14, 16, denote the various Apollo missions. So we've got Apollo 12 there, Apollo 14, 16, 11, 17. So this is where Apollo allegedly landed on the moon, the various sites. And the white arrow there we can see, this is where the Chinese rover landed and took samples in that area. Now, the rocks that supposedly came back from the moon, you can get scientific data which has all been published on the chemical composition of those rocks. And the makeup of those rocks is very similar from the 6 Apollo sites, as he describes in the film. Right? But what Jarrah White has then done is compared the Chinese results with the published results that NASA have put out on the rocks. And what he finds is that someone's lying.
Yeah.
Someone's lying.
Yeah.
So let's just look at magnesium. Like I say, in order to get the full reference and the reasoning or how these graphs have been derived, you need to watch the video. But we've got magnesium here. We see on the right-hand side there, that's the Chang'e 3, the Chinese mission, 0.2% for magnesium. And we've got all of the Apollo missions, Apollo 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, much, much higher. And we can just zip through the various different elements. Aluminium, again, Chang'e 3, much, much lower in aluminium. Silicon, calcium, titanium, chromium, strontium, yttrium, and zirconium. So the rocks that China have analysed are totally different, different in almost every way to what NASA have allegedly brought back from the moon. And I think Jarrah White suggests that the ones that Apollo claimed to be from the moon, they're just from some remote part of the Earth, probably. That's what he suggests.
Yeah, I think he makes some comparisons to certain Earth geology to draw that conclusion. It is a very detailed video and very, very well done.
Now, you've got some more moon evidence you wanted to...
Well, there's just a few things I think that are probably worth adding, which have, again, more recent ones that have come up. The first one is this clip of Don Pettit who's this NASA astronaut who basically will play the clip. It's very, very short. And this was released in an IB Times video, which I think was a collation of little sound bites from people that work at ESA, the European Space Agency, and a few other people. One of whom was this Don Pettit character who says that they've destroyed the technology that took them to the moon.
Well, let's have a look at that then.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
They just chucked it in the skip then, though.
And for example, somebody wrote to me fairly recently because I'd mentioned the Wernher von Braun description of how you'd need a rocket which was 10 times bigger than Apollo. It's in his book, Conquest of the Moon.
All right then, Andrew. Thanks very much.